Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're finally here to check out the full Immortal Empires campaign map. Now, there's a few things we need to talk about before we begin, and this is of course, the map itself is in beta, so it might not be perfect. There might be some issues with a frame drop here or there, or even some type of texture going missing and all that, but this is a mod that I'm using, and obviously mods aren't really stable at the moment, so this might cause a few issues here or there. However, it's still important as we do need to look around the map, as, well, there's a lot to talk about. It's absolutely massive. We now have a world to conquer. So we're going to start off with the Southern Chaos Wastes, an area that we don't really know much about in lore, mostly because it was only featured in a few books here or there. We know that there's a lot of beastkin here, but unfortunately beastkin aren't in the game, or at least just yet. So you start off with Oxyodal being here, there's demon factions all around, so yeah, it kind of makes sense for Oxyodal to be able to fight as many demons as possible. It's a nice enough area for you to expand and then make your way into the Southlands, and pretty much anywhere else. I've already played a bit with Oxyodal, and I think it's a good base of operations. Keep in mind that you still have to teleport and so on for your usual campaign stuff, so I think it works out very, very well, and yeah, soon enough you're basically already in the Southlands fighting against Kairos, so you've already got another demon faction. This depends if Teclis has killed them or not, or how fast you work. Sometimes Teclis wins, sometimes Kairos wins. It's very, very strange there. But this is what happens because it's Total War and it's kind of random, so there's not really too much to talk about there. We do obviously have to talk a little bit about the Eastern Colonies, which right now is just 3 settlements. It's rather small, but we're expecting Sea Lord Aisling there eventually. It's a pretty good place for a High Elf Lord, because, well, it's all High Elf and stuff. But yeah, small, quaint, kind of happy, and really there's not much that we can talk about. However, it's a nice little area which allows you to mount a few sea invasions if you so wish, so yeah, you've got the option. We're moving on to the Kingdoms of Ind now, and it's, well, small, but still big enough. Obviously, there's no land there. It's just got trees, a little bit of detailing that could be expected because we're expecting these areas to be opened up eventually. But it's pretty impressive. You can more or less see where settlements are going to go eventually. And yeah, even the mountains over there kind of look like they already started shaping out where they're going to start adding in the entrances from Cafe and so on. And I think that's pretty cool. I'm really excited about this. But there's definitely a lot more to come, and you can kind of see that once we start moving into the lands of Koresh. There's also a little bit of territory there which should fall under the Southern Chaos Waste, but seems to be jungle here. But I'm imagining that that's going to be opened up eventually too, since they put the landmass there. And yeah, Koresh is massive. Koresh is just freaking massive. And you can already see more or less once again where they're going to be putting settlements, where they're going to be putting a lot of different things. I can't wait to see what the plan is. I'm likely thinking that we're going to see territories first there with minor factions and then eventually race packs. We're going to have to wait and see, obviously, as this series does progress. But it's rather exciting. We got 2 absolutely massive landmasses which are just empty, unplayable. If you recall how things worked in Warhammer 1, then you're already used to this, as Athaloran originally was not playable. Then we do have another area which is in-game and is empty at the moment. I imagine that that will also be opened up, which I believe was called Hankau in a small portion of a book. I think it was just in the End Times Chronicles, which would be Warhammer Korea. It's rather small, but once again, enough area to put like 1 or 2 provinces, maybe even expand the map that way, because we are expecting map expansions. We've seen map expansions before. This is entirely possible. So yeah, like it's not Nippon, but Nippon eventually we'll see, like it's almost certain. But it's still rather curious that Warhammer Korea has been added in, unless there is plans for something there in the future, maybe a chaotic tribe, maybe its own thing. We're gonna have to wait and see, but I wanted to talk about these areas because it's kind of important. Alright, so now it's time for the big boy, Grand Cafe. So, yeah, Warhammer 3 Realm of Chaos map didn't really show Grand Cafe at its proper size, and now we get to see Grand Cafe as it was kind of intended. It's absolutely massive. We've got loads of factions. There's Wood Elf factions. There's Norskin factions in there. Even Vampirates and Vampire counts. It's actually really, really big, and you can see all the different type of architecture. The scenery is gorgeous. This is something which I've always been curious about, and a lot of people have been too, considering that we've never really had Grand Cafe until Warhammer 3. Yes, we did have some miniatures way back in the day. That was even before I was born, but this is finally here, and it's absolutely huge. There's so many twists and turns. It's going to keep you busy, but I think that it's going to be for a fun campaign. It's way more impressive than it was in Realm of Chaos, that's for sure. Realm of Chaos just kind of had like a half of Cafe, and it made it feel so scrunched, whereas now we get to see Loki Felheart there, Nakai the Wanderer. You get to see all these different factions that are going to be fighting around these areas. We'll be talking about the Northern Chaos Wastes and the Eastern Wastes in a second, but there's just so much. It's impressive. I can't believe we had to wait this long to see Grand Cafe in its full scale, but I just honestly can't wait. It's really, really cool that we're finally seeing the country which we've heard so many things about, but we've never actually seen in its fullest scope. Now, yes, there's loads of things that we need to wait for, future DLC, future dragons, the Monkey King, and all that, but at least now we know, and we can pinpoint where things go, how things will look. We actually get a lot of just general knowledge about the country just by seeing a world map, essentially. It's just that, but it's a bit more to give us some context. So we're going to talk about the Mountains of Morn, but we're also going to talk about the Dragon Elves, because we might as well. So the Dragon Elves is where Kurgath starts, which there's also a Lisbon faction. It should be quite interesting to just fight your way through. Obviously, you've got Helm and Gorse there. You'll also see a little bit of stutter, but that's what I warned you about earlier in the video. The Mountains of Morn themselves are quite large, and, well, that's supposed to be expected because there's a lot of territory there. It does feel like it's a bit less scrunched up than it was in the Realm of Chaos map, which is obviously really good. There's a lot of twists and turns. Some people might like it, some people might hate it. I personally don't like going through mountains. Same thing as Norska, but hey, some other players will, you know, enjoy it depending on their playstyle. Grimgor is obviously in this area too. You've got the Chaos Dwarves eventually coming out, you know, so we've got enemies to those areas. It's going to be quite fun. I think that now with a big mountain range like that, launching an invasion from, say, playing as Grimgor right into the territory of Cafe is going to be quite fun, and that's obviously the most important thing. Then we have to think about the Darklands in general. The Darklands, I mean, they're big. We're waiting. And the area looks already cool. Certain places that you zoom in, you can kind of see a little bit of soot and all that type of stuff. So you know what's coming. We all know what's coming, and I can't wait. It's obviously very empty at the moment. I don't know if they're going to add in more settlements in the future, which I think would be a good idea. Because even with the settlements that we have now, they're very, very apart. And I feel like maybe it'll be better if they add in a few more, and just a few more areas just to kind of make things feel a little bit more lived in, especially when we get the Chaos Dwarves. It's not needed now, but it will definitely be needed in the future. That being said, again, it's freaking awesome. I'm just so hyped up. I can't wait for Chaos Dwarves. I really, really can't wait. So hopefully we won't have to wait too long. Now, we are going to look at the Eastern Wastes because, you know, that's where Village is. I can't click on the characters. I can't click on any of the DLC characters until I'm allowed to show the DLC stuff. So I do apologize. But obviously the Eastern Wastes we're already kind of used to. These are all the areas that go pretty much up to Archaon the Everchosen. And these are areas that were in the Realm of Chaos map. You guys have seen it. So it's not really something that really needs a lot of talking about. It's just, we're just going to be there, you know, that's where your vassals are if you're playing as a Chaos faction, or that's where you're going to be dealing with a lot of corruption if you're playing as an Order, Destruction, or even Undead faction. That being said, it's enough territory to be able to expand, and I think that's quite important for Chaos, especially since, you know, you're playing as Village, you're right in the corner of the map, or Archaon if you're trying to go down that way, but I think that you'll probably go down into Kislev, relive the end times type of thing. It very much depends on your playstyle, but it does give you room for Village to expand, to get to some Dark Fortresses and so on. You'll be able to see all the Dark Fortress stuff soon, don't you worry about that. So yeah, it's just a case about waiting and going from there. Same thing could be said about the Northern Chaos Wastes themselves. Obviously, Daniel's up here, you've got Malice, you've got Sigvald, you've got Boris Ursus. That's going to be a fun campaign. It's one that I haven't been able to try out yet, but mind you, I will be doing loads of videos. I will be streaming a lot too, so don't you have to worry. There's a lot to come. And yeah, these are territories that we've already seen with the whole Realm of Chaos map, but it's scrunched up a little bit more. There's less areas because it's more fitting around, you know, this isn't really the big portion of the map. But still, there's a lot to expand upon. There's loads of dark fortresses there too. You just can't see it because I'm playing as an Empire faction at the moment. However, you've likely already seen them when I showed off the Warriors of Chaos rework. As it stands, yeah, loads of territories. Loads and loads of territories. It brings you into the Dark Elf lands too. You've got a lot of expansion. You can go down to Norska if you so wish. It very much depends on your playstyles and obviously who you're playing. But it's absolutely massive. I've been scrolling around. Like, this video right now is around 10 minutes long. But I've been scrolling around for a while, just kind of looking at it, going, my god, this is massive. That's what she said. But as you can see, we're already passing by through Albion, and that's where Be'lakor starts. There's some Tzeentchian faction there too, so you've got something to fight at the very beginning, and obviously a vassal there. Norska hasn't really changed too much. Really, it's more just kind of moving what was part of a settlement to a different province and all that type of stuff, which works out quite well, don't get me wrong. Norska is still one of those areas that I don't like, which is a bit annoying considering that Azazel starts there, and we all know how I think about Norska, but it works out well for a Chaos faction starting there, considering that there's quite a lot of areas that you can take and a lot of people that you can vassalize. Generally, everything works out quite well, you know, and I think that works out in a very good way to launch invasions. Once again, if you're playing as a Chaos faction, you've got Kislev to the south, you've got the North Dwarfs, which hopefully they'll get some DLC in the future. There's just so much there, and you can see that more as you start going down. You know, obviously we've got Kislev, which is a little smaller, or it feels a little smaller than Realm of Chaos, but then again, Kislev isn't really a big country. Kislev's quite small, and it's still defendable. I've been playing a little bit of Kislev in my own time, and I think it's actually not too bad. It's just trying to get some use to it now that it feels a bit more scrunched up, and you've obviously got a few legendary lords in that area, which will start causing you problems. It's not just the Chaos factions now, but it's also Azag and a few others. Kislev actually feeling strong, that actually brings you a bit of a more lore-friendly sense, because you're a small country versus, well, one of the most terrifying things ever, but you know what I mean. It's kind of cool. The Empire itself hasn't really changed. This is expected. Really, when you look throughout the Empire, yeah, I mean, there's been a few changes, minor changes at least, to Sylvania, where settlements have been moved around to different provinces, but that's pretty much it. Obviously, the Brass Keep is there now, but generally, everything feels the same. Duffu was moved, though, which I think is interesting, unless he always started there and I just never noticed. Because it could be possible. I'm just very blind with these things. But yeah, everything else feels normal. Telebeckland is massive. A lot of people got kind of worried because Realm of Chaos map did shrink Empire provinces a few. Yeah, it was weird. But yeah, everything's perfectly fine here. I think that works out quite well. Everything just still feels like it should, and it's absolutely massive. I've been enjoying the Call France campaign too. I think it's actually kind of fun, especially since you got Festus at the very start. You already have a very clear enemy, and you've got the vampires too. So there's a lot more to fight. It feels a lot more hectic, and I think that the extra aggression makes you actually have a bit more fun, if that makes any more sense. Some people might not like it so much, but, you know, it's the Empire. It's not really that difficult of a faction to get used to, so it's not like you're going to be suffering, and that's an important thing. But now we're going to start moving on to Britonia, and really, Britonia itself hasn't changed. It's Musalon has just kind of moved, just taken over another settlement, that's pretty much it. And, yeah, the country's the same as Athaloran. Nothing's really changed there, and I think that works out quite well, because at the end of the day, these are nations that shouldn't have changed by any means, so everything kind of just stays the same. I don't know what anyone was expecting there. I mean, some people were expecting changes, yeah, but, you know, there's still potential in the future if anything does show up. But obviously now we can move on once again, and we start looking towards the Southern Realms, which, I mean, is something that we're waiting for a lot, you know, Dogs of War and so on, and is becoming more and more likely considering that Estalia was made a little bit bigger with adding a second region, more settlements too. This used to be a 3 settlement area. Now the country has 5 in total, but some extra areas have also been added in. Obviously Talia has a few extra areas. It's just one more, which is Riff Rafa. It's something that bothers me, and I've mentioned to the devs, because Riffraff is actually a site of a battle, not a settlement. It's just kind of weird. Sartos is the same. We do have more in the Border Prince territories. That's also where Squad the Sorter is. So it's got a lot of varied areas. It's got a lot of areas too. Belagar kind of is closer to Miragliano now, which I think might be quite interesting. I should try out his campaign. All in all, I'd say that this is going to be quite fun in the eventuality that we do get the Dogs of War. I still think we will. It's just time will tell. Now, if we start moving on to the World's Edge Mountains, obviously the northern World's Edge Mountains, it's what's expected. Nothing's really changed there. You can see that, well, yeah, everything's the same. Everything is very, very much the same. There is one more settlement, which is actually very, very close to Karazakarak, but other than that, those areas all the way down to, say, Black Crag is all the same. The only difference is that Black Crag belongs to the Skaven, which is kind of weird. It should really belong to Gorfang Rockgut and all that, but again, it's just the case of having to wait for Gorfang Rockgut to be eventually added in. Generally, can't really complain again. These areas that we're already used to, well, we're used to. We can't really expect anything else changing there, and I think that's perfectly fine. If we start moving into the Badlands, again, everything's very, very much the same. Nothing's really changing there, obviously, barring the fact that Skarbrand is very, very close now. But these things is good. What you will notice is that there's a lot more ogre camps all around the world. They're becoming very, very frequent, and it's going to give you some variety to fight. Obviously, I'm just kind of sick of seeing ogres all over the place, but maybe that's just me. However, everything still looks rule-friendly. Everything still feels like Warhammer Fantasy. Yes, Total War Warhammer, but Warhammer Fantasy is the main thing. And I think that's alright. I think that's honestly perfectly fine. But now we're going to look towards the Southlands, and there's a lot to talk about here, because it's big. It's very, very big. Keep in mind that obviously when we were used to Mortal Empires, it was much smaller. This is more in line with that of the Eye of the Vortex, and it feels like that too, and I think that's great. Araby itself is quite large. You can see a lot of territory, especially with the Great Desert over there. So that's all areas that we can expect, but things start getting a bit stranger as we start going to, say, for example, Volkmar and all that type of stuff. Volkmar has his own start position here, obviously in Southernburg, and that's going to be for a nice, fun, thematic campaign, because obviously you've got your own unique mechanics and so on. But you can see that Cetra is obviously in a different position, because most of the cities have been moved around. Obviously, Numas is now in the Land of the Dead. It's made it a little bit more scrunched up, but also made it a lot bigger. This is the thing where, yes, not every single settlement from the Eye of the Vortex was able to be added in, but it definitely does feel like there's a lot more room. It feels like you can play and fight with loads of different factions. The Southlands is going to be perfect for that, because I don't know why Creative Assembly decided, let's move the Lustria Ball into the Southlands Thunderdome, but it's been doubled at the very least. You've got Skarbrand, you've got Queek, a little bit further north, obviously. You've got Techlist, Krokar, you've got Manfred. There's so many different factions, and I feel like it's going to be quite an interesting campaign, especially if you want something kind of short, if you want to have a fun head-to-head. This kind of feels a lot like the Eye of the Vortex campaign size, and I think that's probably one of the best things that you can get from this, because now the Southlands actually feels like there's going to be a lot to fight in. And really, that's all we really wanted. Now, if we look towards, say, for example, other countries, that's where things do feel a little bit stranger. Like, for example, in Ulf-1. Ulf-1 is the exact same size, but still feels a little bit smaller. I don't know what I was expecting here. Obviously, it's going to be quite interesting, because you do have a number of legendary lords starting here, and Nakari being here is going to be a very interesting campaign. I've been playing this a lot too. If you're looking for something quite lore-friendly, and you're looking for something quite thematic that works out quite well, Tyrion is also quite an interesting campaign, or even Alariel. Alariel having the Dark Elves and Nakari there does make it a lot more fun, or at least from my opinion, it's made it a lot more fun, and I think that's probably one of the best things that Creative Assembly have done so far. It is very, very important to note that scaling is always going to be a bit of an issue here, because Games Workshop never gave a proper, true scale of the world. Maps have always changed, and that's how it works. But if we start moving on, we move on to Lustria, and yeah, this is just so fun. So, Lustria, as we know in Mortal Empires, was squished, and it felt it so bad. It was just horrendous. It was not fun. now you've got a full world. Now you've got, well, a full continent. And I think that's honestly going to make it a lot more fun. I played a little bit with Albric, not Clan Pestilence just yet, which is my favorite Skaven clan, but I was just really confused as to how a Britonian faction would work. So far, so good. There's a lot of allies there for anything, really. And you're going to notice it. It depends on how you expand and what enemy starts expanding further. Especially with the Vampire Coast, I think that Harkin even has it a little bit better too, at least it feels that way. But expansion is very rewarding here. You don't feel like you're bogged down, and it gives you a lot more to fight as you prepare yourself to go and launch an assault to the north, or launch an assault into Orth-1, or anything really. Now, as we start moving up, yeah, this is the same areas where we've got, Mazdamundi. The New World colonies are here too, which are expected to be part of the Dogs of War eventually, but nothing really changes here, and I think that's a good thing. It didn't really need to change. Those areas work out very, very well, and it's enough to allow expansion if you decide to play as the Big Daddy once again. So if we start moving further into the Dark Elf territories, again, not much changes. Obviously, Lady Darfin is here, but in general, there's a little bit of squished feeling with Orth-1. I think that's probably the only thing I can say. Everything feels a little too close, but the territories, they're the same. Torox is still going to be doing his damage. Katep is still here being Katep, which really, who's going to play as Katep? Alifanar has been moved ever so slightly. Morafi's still in her location. Malekith's still in the same area. I think this all works out very, very well. These territories are what we're used to. A little bit expanded upon, obviously, because, Immortal Empires kind of brings it out a little bit further to the west. But everything is kind of the same. I think that's probably the best way I can explain it. It's going to feel familiar. While a little bit bigger, it's still very, very familiar. So your campaigns aren't going to radically change. There are a few areas where you can move around a bit better. And launching attacks as Grombrindle is going to be a lot more fun. But again, yeah, not a lot of changes. I think that's a good thing. This is areas that we weren't really expecting anything, so yeah, that's perfectly fine. I think some extra settlements would have been lovely. Obviously, Alifanar has been a bit of a big conversation point because people aren't keen. I haven't played the campaign yet, so I can't really complain. Because I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I wanted to play with the Chaos rework first because, we've been waiting like 5 years for that. I think that you can easily deduce this is a massive map. I'll be honest with you, it took me a fair amount of time, and I play Total War a lot. But it took me a fair amount of time to paint the map. Yes, I did attempt it. It was a long, long time, but mind you, I've not been sleeping for personal matters for the past week and a half. You guys are aware of this at this point. So, a lot of time I've been playing. Yeah, and it's helped me relax at the very least. It was interesting to do. Mind you, I did pick a faction which is probably not the best for painting, because, yeah. However, you can easily see that there is so much to do. There is so much replayability, especially with factions that you played before in Mortal Empires. You're going to want to do it again and again and again. It's massive. It's absolutely massive. And we know that we're going to be getting more. We know that we're going to get Inns. We know that we're going to get Koresh. At least the land masses are going to be opened up. We don't know about factions just yet. And I still think that we're going to get them. Time will tell. Chaos Dwarfs need to come. Dogs of War need to come. Factions need to come. There's loads of characters that need to come. I'm very, very impressed. The map is massive. And yeah, we just have to wait and see how it expands, how the series grows. Hopefully it's still popular, time will tell. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and let's start a bit of discussion. I wanted to do this video because I know a lot of people have been curious about the map.